All right. It looks like well, my house it's 2:59. Some people's houses it's 3:59. So we're in two time zones over here, which I always like.
Yeah.
But the big question is are we going to talk about the IU thing again tonight?
We're not, because I didn't watch that because it was so bad. Did you see that, Glenda?
Oh, I did. That's what I get for coming to all these, you know.
That's what you got out of it, right? That's what you get out of it. I like it.
That's what I got out of it, you know. What can I say?
That makes me happy. Except for that, yeah, that was real bad.
Yeah, everybody that missed is going to wonder what we're talking about. So there you go. That's what they get for missing out.
Exactly. They got to watch the video, right?
Hey, that raises a good point too. I was going to share a link real quick to the Padlet that's got last month's recording, and the resources there are stored in that Padlet there. So if you didn't get to see last month's session one on just the process and I guess the beginning of the IEP process and all those fun timelines associated with it, that's available in that Padlet. And you can see, if you visit it right now, you can also see the presentation that Alana's going to run through for us today also. So that's
and we will make a playlist, so to speak. So when you get your certificates, you'll also get the playlist. So you'll get session 1, session 2, and then we'll just keep building. So it's all in one place and people can access it in one place.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. So that's good.
Yeah.
I just admitted a couple more people. Then I'll let you guys do that and we'll probably start going. But welcome to Best Practices in IEP Writing. This is session 2. I am Alana Harveth, and I have Matt and Gail also here. So Gail was not here the last one, but she is here this one. So we're going to kind of introduce ourselves. I'm going to take the lead on this one. Matt's going to jump in and Gail's going to jump in as they are co-teachers also. So I think Matt and Gail will probably be minding the chat also. So I'll let Gail, you start. Just say a little bit about yourself and then we can
go from there. I'm Gail Ringwald and I was a classroom teacher, special ed for a long time, 22 years. And then I was the principal at the School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. So I continued with special ed. So I've done a lot of case conferences and yeah, so I'm here to help.
Thank you. And Matt?
Yeah, I guess I'm also here to help today. I'll try to do that, and I'll be checking the chat. Make sure if you have any questions, and I'll be posting kind of questions out to the chat as well. My background is also, as you might imagine, special education. Several years in the classroom, and working in different areas of the state. I've been with the Resource Center, 17 years, something like that. So sneaking up on me a little bit here, but hopefully I can bring that to help you all as we go through this afternoon.
Thanks, Matt. And I'm Alana Harveth. I also special education. I was a teacher. Then I went in a coordinator role, so looking at IEP compliance and writing goals, supporting teachers anyway. I taught students with autism, so that was kind of my what I'm specialty in. But I also have some co-teaching experience as well. So we are all have a little bit of expertise. I was middle school and a couple of years in elementary. Matt, I know, was high school, and Gail's all over too. So we can kind of get you
mostly middle school. They're my favorite.
Middle school mostly.
Yeah.
Yes. So I have a little bit of elementary. So we are kind of well-rounded, all three of us. We can answer. Hopefully, can answer.
I was a principal for elementary.
Yes, principal for elementary. So So we all have a little expertise everywhere. So we're glad that you are here. If you were here before, you might remember this, but that's okay because we always like to start with our beliefs. We believe that all students can learn and achieve great things. We believe that all students are general education students first, right? Some students receive special education services, but all students are general education students first. And we really try to hit that home whenever we do a training. We believe that in order to meet the needs of all students, it's necessary to meet the needs of each student. And that's Leanne Young, Frey, and Fisher, and Kroner. We like that quote because that's what IEPs are, right? They're individualized to meet the needs of each of the students. So it does start with our beliefs. And also, I'm going to try to engage with you as much in the chat as possible. There's about 20 people on. So you, of course, we always say that choice is the friend of inclusion. So you are able to unmute yourself and answer the questions that way, or use the chat and ask any questions. So if you have a question and you're like, please stop and explain that, please ask us. We're going to try to leave some time at the end to answer questions. If you have your own IEPs, fabulous. If you have access to those while we're talking, that would be great. Matt put the Padlet link into the chat if you guys want to put that up on a tab also and follow along, maybe on your computer. But really just pause. It's very informal. We're going to give you some information, but I'm going to try to engage as much as possible in this chat in the virtual land. You know how sometimes that's hard. So, but I do want you guys to feel free to be able to ask those questions or email us after if you don't want to ask in front of a group, because we do want to, we're here to support you. All right. So we saw this last time, again, if you were here. But in the chat, what does this represent to you? What do you guys, education is like what? And also, if you don't want to, if you've already seen this and we've already talked about this, what is something that happened today at school that was a win in your classroom or in your school? What's something that happened today that was a good thing? I just want to start kind of looking at the chat, but you could either answer two questions. Education is like this picture. What does that mean to you? Or maybe something that happened in your school or in your classroom that was good today. I just want us to start like sharing and be able to kind of talk as much as possible on this virtual. So either one. I know Matt went over the slide last time if you guys were here, but what does this slide remind you of? Education is like this. What does that mean? You could answer that question, or something that happened good in your classroom today, or something that happened in your building, or something that happened in your life, even if it's not in your classroom. Just to try to get us to have some conversation. I'm trying to think if anything happened today good, and my day was busy, but I'm trying to think, because sometimes it's good to reflect on something that happened good to you, even if it's not in your classroom, but you could even say something with a colleague or anything like that. I'm trying to give you some wait time, but this picture last time Matt kind of explained it. Ooh, I love this. Oh, good. Oh no, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. That doesn't sound good. Oh, that's great. I'm reading your guys' chats. I love it. Education is like a series of stairs. Which way they go depends on your perception. Ooh, I love that. I have not heard that before. Anything else? Oh, that's great. I love that. Last time, I think somebody said there's many pathways to get to the same place. There's guardrails if you need them. Sometimes I feel like taking the stairs, and sometimes I feel like taking a ramp. I feel like, is that how you guys feel too? And that is how education is. There's many pathways to get to the same place. Sometimes we need support, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we need to be challenged. So thank you guys for doing that. You guys that's good stuff. No, Ashley, I was just kind of, it's a maze. I like that. I was just trying to say if there's anything that happened good in your classroom or anything happened that good to you today, and we're talking about this picture about education is like what? What does this mean to you? Looking at all these stairs and all these rails, just trying to get some feedback from you guys. Advocating for one of your 2R students and getting him the help that he needed. I love that. And some days we roll down, like some of my kids go down the ramp. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you. There's a lot of us here. I just wanted to try to get some interaction. Matt and Gail, you have anything to say about that? Or are you guys going to keep on going? You guys can write in the chat too.
Keep on going.
All right. All right. So Rose by any other name, and keep on putting stuff in the chat if you want. I really like reading that stuff. So thanks. So do you guys call it a PLAAFP? And some people, Matt told me earlier, called it a PLEP, which I never heard. So 20 years ago when I started teaching, I called it a PLEP, right? And so now we have to add the PLAAFP because it's the present levels of academic and functional performance, right? And some people say it's the present levels of existing performance. So whatever you guys call it, we're just gonna call it present levels today, but we're gonna talk about what it means. So it doesn't really matter what you call it, but we know we have to have certain things based on the law, right? So again, and if you guys call it something different, put that in the chat too, because I'm always learning something. I learned something new when I was going over these slides. So it doesn't really matter what you call it, but it just matters what's inside of it. So according to our legal definition idea, it has to have I'm going to say the present levels, but it has to be the present levels of academic and functional performance. That's what we call it now. The statement of the child's present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, including. So it has to have these two parts. How the child's disability affects the child's involvement and progress in the general education curriculum. So if a student has a specific learning disability, how is that impacting his access to the general education curriculum? Well, we know that a student that has a learning disability sometimes cannot read on grade level. So we have to put that impact statement in that present level. It doesn't just impact his reading class, but it also impacts maybe social studies, math, because we have word problems, right? It's going to impact his whole day. So we have to put that in the present levels. It has to be something that you add to for the impact statement. And as any of you guys do preschool, because if you do preschool, you have to have the bottom part for the preschool children as appropriate. How does the disability affect those kids in activities as their non-disabled peers? So as appropriate. So we can see those two parts. Now, you don't have to, of course, address preschool if you don't have the little kids, but you do have to if you do have those kids. So those are the two parts from the legal perspective that you have to mention in your present levels.
And I will just add that doesn't, if you're just putting in grades or test results, that's not really what they are asking for. Because as you know, later on, you're going to have to write goals for skills. So grades don't really tell you a lot. You may know a lot, but if you send it to me at a different school system, those won't have any meaning to me. So be careful, those of you that just put grades and test scores.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at an example of a present level, and kind of a vague statement, and then kind of how can we clear that up to make it more specific, like Gail is talking about, and not just be subjective, because grades are sometimes subjective. But the present level and somebody asked, I think Ashley in the chat, Matt, I think she asked for the slides, and they are in that Padlet, where I think he put the link before. You will have access to the slides, yes, and the recording. So there should be a direct relationship between the present levels of performance and the other components of the IEP. They're calling it like the golden thread, which means that everything in the IEP has to go together, right? The present level is the meat of the IEP. So we have to have a direct relationship between that and everything else. If it's not mentioned in the present levels, then we should not have a goal for it. And I'm going to give an example of this in a little bit, but say a student has a goal for behavior, but when you're in your present levels and you're not putting some data in there, your baseline data, where are we getting that information from? It has to match. We have to have supports based on the present levels. We have to have the goals. Everything has to be in alignment in order for it to be compliant. So we're going to look at that and talk about what that means. We're going to dissect that a little bit. A little bit more of the legal perspective, because we know that we know what an IEP is, but what happens when it fails? So if the IEP fails to assess the child's present levels of academic achievement and performance, the IEP does not comply with IDEA. So we have to make sure that those present levels address both the academic and functional performance of that student. So even if your student does not, so some of my students needed speech, and I would put that in that functional performance, right? Because they needed speech. But if your students are typically communicating or they're able to navigate the halls, you need to just put that in there, that the students are able to communicate, with each other. They're able to navigate the hallways. We just have to address, that functional piece also with our students. They're typically developing, that we just put a little bit of statement in there that we can address both of those things. This deficiency goes to the heart of the IEP. The child's level of academic achievement and functional performance is the foundation on which the IEP must be built. What does that mean? To me, that means we have to have a baseline, right? Where are we getting our goals? We have to know where the student is in order to know where they're going to go, right? So in that present level, we have to make sure that we have data in there. Like Gail said, it's not just grades, but we have to have skill-based data in that and to know where the students are going to go. And I'm going to give some specific examples on some other slides, but we're going to kind of talk about this. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. But without a clear identification of present levels, the IEP team cannot set measurable goals kind of what I said, evaluate student progress or determine needed educational services. So if I don't know if what the student knows, I can't make a goal around it. My daughter is in kindergarten and they're doing like phonics. And so if her baseline is, if she doesn't have any of those skills, like if she's 0 out of 26, if she can't, do any of those phonics, sounding out those words, then that would be where I would put it in the present levels. Like she has 0 phonics skills. But sometimes I see goals that have the baseline, the students are at 0 and we're trying to get them to 80%. Where am I getting that number from? The number really should be in that present levels. The baseline should be in that present levels. If the student's at 20%, then that's where the goal should start. And then I'm going to try to get them to that 80%. But if we don't have that data in the present levels, then I'm not able to write my goals around that skill that they're needed. And sometimes we see that with IEPs, we see some data that we're not sure where it came from, but it really should start in that present level of academic and functional performance, if that makes sense. And please, if you have a question, shout it out or stop me so I can explain it. But Mitch Yell, he's kind of like he was a special education teacher a long time. He does all of these things with compliance and IEP writing. And Mitch Yell says, accurate present level of academic and functional performance statements provide the starting point for all decisions regarding a student's IEP. So just like I talked about, if it's not in that present level, then that's where we're getting the goals from. That's where we're getting the accommodations from. That's where we're getting it's the meat of the IEP. So we really have to make sure that those are robust and that we know what we're trying to describe, and we're using data. We're using good data. So Matt, what do you guys think about this? Have you guys seen these memes and they kind of change that picture? But internal consistency is really the key to quality IEP, right? So I've been kind of talking about this for the last few slides, but if I'm going to give this to Gail or Matt, they should be able to know what I'm saying after they read this IEP. We have to have consistency. We have to have data. It has to make sense why I'm making a goal for reading. I have to have it written. The baseline needs to be written in that PLAAFP. And then I have to have a goal around it. And then we have to have the accommodation with it, especially design instruction. All of it has to go together. If somebody's taking my IEP, we really have to have that internal consistency or that golden thread.
And I would
Matt
say
or Gail, would you like to add something?
Yeah, one measure of this one is being able to reasonably predict what's going to happen next. So as you read through present levels, you may not match exactly what's going to come in the rest of the IEP, but you should be able to reasonably guess based on the information you have what's coming. There shouldn't really be any big surprises there. You might not match up exactly because we're all different people and we read things differently and all that. There's a lot of variation within that realm, but you should be able to reasonably predict what's going to happen in the IEP. So like Alana mentioned, if there's behavior discussed in the present levels, I should see a resolution to that throughout the rest of the IEP. If I see a reading need, I should see that discussed and resolved throughout that IEP too. So then we have different ways of doing that, and the goals might look different entirely from person to person, but they should still be addressed. So that's a good measure. Mm-hmm.
Matt, this is Elisa.
Yes.
One of the things that comes to mind is that when I was training out goals quite a bit, it was you should almost trip over what the goal's going to be if there's enough information about the student. It should be that obvious. So just that might make you think about differently.
As you collect the information, and like you said, it's going to be pretty clear where we need to go. And that's one of the things that I mentioned to people. We're not there yet. When we talk about goals, if you're struggling with writing goals, this is probably what you need to come back to. Like, we don't have the information to write a good goal for the student. So let's look at what information we do have. And what do we need to get still? What are we missing, if anything? And I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit here, but that is the idea.
No, that's great. Thank you, guys. And this is, this is a statement that actually Matt was just kind of summarized this, but a brief but detailed description of all areas of the academic achievement and functional performance that are affected by a student's disability. I like that you say brief but detailed, because it doesn't, it doesn't mean if the PLAAFP is really big, it doesn't mean it's telling us what we need to know. I was an English major. Sometimes I had really big fluffy stories, but if it didn't have the data and the details, then it doesn't mean just because it's longer words, it means it's better, right? So sometimes we get these IEPs in from other, move-ins, or you get an IEP and you have a lot of words, but you still don't know what the student is able to do, or the deficit or the strengths. So all of those things have to happen in order. So we have to have data, and we have to be very specific about it, because we need to know what skills we need to work on, and that needs to be in the PLAAFP statement. So I always think about that, like, just because it has lots of words in it doesn't mean it's always best. So we're gonna and we have some examples of good ones at the end too. So if you guys want to look at these on your own, it's kind of a resource. But I like to think about it like that. And this is kind of goes along with it. But present levels, have you guys ever gotten an IEP? And you can put it in the chat. And you, like, say I was a middle school teacher. And so a student would come in 6th grade, and I would have stuff from kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade in there. And present levels really should be current and relevant. So what does that mean? That means that if my student's not eloping anymore in 6th grade, but they were eloping in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd, and that stuff is still in that present levels because the teacher kept moving it on and moving it on, you could take it out if it's not going to help me at all. Like, thank gosh that, kids mature and they're different now and they're in 6th grade, but I would get IEPs with stuff in it when they were little, like they were like these behaviors. And I'm like, well, that's not current and relevant, right? So making sure that they're current and relevant. Has anybody else gotten those and those IEPs? They have like old stuff, because if I need to know that, I can go to another IEP from a different year, and I can go pull it if I need to do that. But I need to have things that are current and relevant to me now. If it's not helping me now, then it doesn't really need to be in there. And I've seen some IEPs that have stuff in it that shouldn't. I don't know if anybody else has thumbs up, thumbs down in the emojis in the chats, but I've gotten, definitely as a teacher, have gotten stuff in there that I don't think that needed to be in there anymore. So just thinking about that present level should be current and relevant and help me teach my student from now. I appreciate the information sometimes, but it doesn't really always need to be in there.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, sometimes you can delete stuff. And I remind people, you can delete things from the IEP. So if it's not a present level, take it out. It will be saved in your previous IEP that you finalized. So if you think about it, it's important to get rid of stuff that isn't relevant to right now, because otherwise when you get to high school, you'll have a 1,000-page IEP and nobody will know what's relevant. So you need to. And yes, you are absolutely right. Take the stranger test. Dorothy, you're absolutely right. The stranger test. Like, look at your IEPs and think, would anybody know would a different person know what I'm talking about? So, yeah, that's all.
And thank you for the thumbs up in the chats, because other people have gotten IEPs with lots of old stuff in there that they probably could clean up. Because again, like Gail said, it doesn't go away forever. You can find it in a different one. But if it's not current and relevant, we don't need it. It doesn't help us. It has to be skill-based. So it's not based, again, on like grades, but it's based on what skills are the students able to do, right? And so sometimes we write present levels that the student has NWEA, or they have Lexile scores of this. But what does that mean in the NWEA? Is a student able to answer informational tests, not inferential text? Like, what skill are the students good at, and what do they need help with? Decoding, phonics, like those are skills that students need. So present level should be based around, and even if you put like the Lexile score is this and it should be this, that's a little bit helpful. But what is it about the reading that they're having a problem with? Is it the decoding? Is it the fluency? Those are the skills that, or decoding, or phonics, or anything like that, or those are the skills that we need to look at when we look at present levels, because that gives us more information than just kind of those vague, those descriptors and those tests. Because we know that a lot of those NWEA, you can go down to the strands, and that's the information that we're after. What are they good at? What do they need help with? Those are the things that we're talking about with our present levels.
And also remember that when you talk about behaviors too, because if you're an 8th grader, and you haven't bitten anybody since 2nd grade, it doesn't really need to be in there anymore. So, think about the information that is current and that will help you plan for moving forward.
Yes, thank you. For sure. I do see that a lot with behaviors. It was like eloping when they were little, but now we're here, so we don't need that anymore. Or like you said, biting or hitting. Maybe it's less frequent now. So just making sure that they're clear and relevant and they're skill-based. Academic and functional, we talked about that. We have to talk about the skills around academic and functions, communication, and I have a slide about what does that look like, but communication, navigating the hallways, are they able to, go to lunch themselves? Are they able to be in the halls themselves? Those executive functioning skills. So all about those kinds of skills, those are also should be talked about, the skills in the present levels. And they're about, we talked about this, about access to and the progress in the curriculum. We know that we're trying to progress to the general education curriculum. All of our standards are going to be grade level, even if the student is not. It's all about access to those grade level standards. And reflective of the student's strengths, needs, interests, and preferences. So we really have to think about having the student have a voice in their IEP. What do the students like to do? What are they good at? What are they interested in? What are their preferences? And that should change, but that's going to drive, the IEP is for trying to get them, eventually they're going to get older and they're going to need those transition assessments. But we have to think about what kinds of things do they like? We're trying to get their voice. The student has a voice in this IEP, and we want to know what they like, what they're interested in, and their preferences. So all of those things should be in the present levels to get a good picture of what that student is all about. So just thinking about that. Elements of the present level of academic and functional performance, the statements describing the student's needs. We talked about that. What does a student, where are they at now? What do they need? Explanation of the effect of the student's disability on his or her access to and progress in the curriculum. We talked about that impact statement. What is that? And we have some examples of what that looks like in our Padlet. And including baseline data. Like I said, often we see a lot. I see goals that are saying that all the students are at 0 and we're trying to get to 80. So is that 0 baseline in the data of the present levels? What is the present level? Are they at 20%? They can give you some decoding skills, maybe or they can sound out some letters, maybe 5 letters out of 26. Like where are we getting this data from? And we're going to talk about that in a couple of the next slides. And include enough information to build the rest of the IEP. But the design and selection of the goals, especially design instruction, related services, accommodations, and modifications are all based on the information contained here. So if they need one of those things, it should be talked about in the present levels. So, if they have a specific learning disability in reading, we have to talk about its impact of the student's day, and what accommodations will that student need in order to try to get access to that general education curriculum. So all of those things, when we're looking at our present levels, should be, these are kind of like guided questions or guided things to ask yourself if we've addressed all these things in the present levels. Does anybody have any questions, or everybody got it? If you got it, give me a thumbs up or like an emoji, like a smiley face or something in the chat. I hate just talking to the people. I rather have you guys talk back, but I just want to make sure that you guys are we're good. We're good
nice.
here.
Hey, I would also point out too that it can get overwhelming sometimes when we make lists of needs for students, and at some points, sometimes we're going to have to prioritize needs here. So that's one of that conversation at a case conference to have. Like, what are the things we must achieve? What are the things we have to do? Because if, with some of our students with more, I guess, diverse needs and multitude of needs, we can make lists of things we have to get to. And really we have to, so when we talk about statements describing a student's needs, we have to be thoughtful about what we're doing here, because we can I guess overwhelm ourselves and everybody at the meeting if we start making too large of a list. So just something to think about, and it should be an open conversation when we're at our case conference. Like, what's the priority here? What must we do? And I think some of the slides coming up will touch on that a little bit more. But volume is a concern sometimes when we get into needs expressed here, because like Alana mentioned, every need that we express, we've got to do something about. And that doesn't necessarily mean we have to write goals for every need we express, but we do have to make sure when we talk about it, we do something, and that'll come out as we go. I think as we move forward, but I just want to raise that point.
No, that's a great point. because we could talk about a lot of needs that students have, but we have to think about the biggest needs. What are their biggest barriers? And I think that's what usually Matt and I talk about in trainings. What is the biggest, what's going to make the most impact to, to minimize their impact on their disability for that gen ed classroom? So yes, I like that, Matt, for sure. So I'm going to have you guys kind of do a little bit, you're going to help me a little bit in the chat again, but I want you to think about a student that you have and think about 3 or 4 things that that student doesn't know now. And I'm going to give you this example, and you guys can do this on your own, but this is a great exercise when we're talking about maybe doing present levels and then thinking about goals too, because present level and goals are very close together. But what are some things that we need the student to be able to do or to do better in the year? So here's an example of this. To have better self-control. You know that student that I know he could do better, but and you know what that means as a teacher, to have better self-control. They have impulse problems, whatever that looks like in your head. But you know that if you teach them, but what skill are you going to teach them to get that better self-control? But also, how do you know that he doesn't have good self-control as a teacher? How do you know that? Well, you just know that, right? But there has to be some evidence. There has to be evidence or it didn't happen, data or it didn't happen, right? How do we know that he needs better self-control? Well, you just know he's always off task or he's always touching another person. You just kind of know it, but we have to think about where are we getting that baseline data from? So that's just our questions that we're thinking about. And another thing could be maybe this to have better functional reading skills. I know this student could probably get a job, but he doesn't really pay attention to these readings, these signs. He's going to need help with that. That's a skill I probably should be able to teach him. Well, how do I know that he doesn't do that? I just know as a teacher. I'm like, I just know that he needs to do that. He hurries with some things. So we're going to kind of walk through this and what that would look like at the present levels. And I know another thing that maybe is a barrier for a student to talk or to do things with peers more. So I know that the student needs to be able to talk to somebody or have a conversation with somebody. I see them always by themselves, or if they do try to talk to somebody, they're hitting them to try to get them or pulling them in. I think that they'd have a more sense of belonging at school if they're with their peers more often. Like I know that as their teacher, they need help with that, right? And then another thing to put on and take off their coat. I know the student can probably do this. I could work on this because every time I have to help them with their coat or they're always telling me to help them. So when you're thinking about your students, think about a couple things what are their barriers and what can we work on and that can make their life easier in a year, right? That would be like some goals that we could think about and eventually. But we're thinking about how, and you put something in the, I see a chat. Oh, great. Oh, thanks, Matt. So I always think this is a great prompt because it just helps to think about their students about what do we need to work on? What are those skills that they need to work on? So if I had all these things in my mind and I can put this, okay, I know that this is what I need in the present levels. This is how this next slide is how what it would look like in the present level, okay? So your need is better self-control. What does that look like? What does that look like to you? And if you guys were writing in your chat, you guys could think of something differently than this, but what would I write in the present levels to know that he needs better self-control? Well, he averages 2 to 5 disruptive outbursts daily. So as a teacher, your student needs better self-control. What do they need better self-control at? Well, sharing out their thoughts. They're eager to share their thoughts, right? But they're very disruptive. They just say things. So that in our present levels, you would put they average 2 to 5 disruptive outbursts daily. Don't say that they need to work on better self. I mean, you could say they need to work on better self-control, but how do they do it? We have to measure, like, what exactly do you see? What does that mean? They need functional reading skills. We know that. But how do we know that? What's our evidence? Well, sight word vocabulary are 14 words. They don't have decoding skills. We kind of talked about that earlier. Everybody by the end of kindergarten should be able to sound out the alphabet, all of the letters in the alphabet. They're only able to do 2. What is the evidence that you have in your present levels that that's the baseline data, right? So this would be what would go in the present levels. That's your baseline. You gave them a pre-assessment. You gave them an assessment. And that's why your need is going with your present level. We know that we're trying to work on talking or do something with peers. We're trying to have them do something with peers, but what does that look like? What's the evidence? Well, every time that they're approached by a peer, they run away. So that's not appropriate, right? But we know that every time they want to talk to somebody else, they hit them or they pull them. Whatever you're seeing, that's what you write down in the present level. That's your evidence. It doesn't always have to be a test. It could be observational data. It could be, The teacher is data, right? You writing this down, you have that evidence that you're putting that in your present levels. And then of course, put on a takeoff coat. Your present level helps in dressing self by pulling pants up and shirt down. So you're talking about what the student can do, how you're able to help them. Maybe they can't do the zipper because the zipper is really hard. So ask the teacher to zip up the coat 3 times that, or 4 out of 4 times. I mean, maybe they're at 0. They're not able to do that yet. So the present level should be more, not as vague. It should be more descriptive with that evidence. Gail or Matt, do you guys have anything to add to that one? Or does everybody get that? Or
Yeah. Hey, I think that I love these couple slides here personally. I think this is kind of my favorite part because a lot of times this is the information you get. Like, hey, they need better self-control in class, or hey, they're disrupting my class. So it behooves a follow-up question of, well, how do you know that? Because that's really what this present level piece is. Like Alana said perfectly, just that idea that we want to have those conversations around need, but we also want to understand how do we know these things. It's like I have seen the student do this. Last 3 times I was in the classroom, this is what I observed. That's data once you start collecting that or writing those things down. So, like Alana said, I think sometimes we get so reliant on set pieces where it's assessment or a screening tool or something that our school relies on, which are very good tools to use, but our own observations are valuable as well. I really just, how do you know that? How do you know that this student's functional reading skills are not adequate? Well, I should have some evidence for that. Even if it's just the times that I've seen and worked with that student as evidence, I still have something I can lean on. And those are things we can go back to with parents and classroom teachers also. Like, well, you say they're struggling with this at school. How do we know that? What's our evidence for those kind of things? And we can talk through that, and then we can set up a baseline for this, or we can document what we've seen, and then we have evidence going forward for the decision we have to make and the rest of the IEP.
Does anybody have any thoughts about that in the chat? If you guys have access to your IEPs, do you see anywhere that you can maybe improve? And you don't even have to be looking at your IEPs. It could be just somebody out or a move-in, or I feel like after I've gone through some trainings that I was a little bit more like the student is impulsive, but I didn't really do this very as well as I could, right? So we're just trying to give you some tips. If you have your own IEP access, or if you don't, that's okay. This is just like practicing if you're coming up with an IEP, but make it as more specific. This is kind of a good example. I like this slide, but if anybody wants to share, they can, but you don't have to. It's just kind of a reflective thing, and nice to I always like to use my own work because it's fine. I always say you do better when you know better, right? You don't know what you don't know. So once I learn, and I feel like everybody can learn something. So hopefully you have a couple tips that you can go back and look at your own IEPs and see how you can improve on that if they need it. So here's some areas to consider: academic, communication, functional, general intelligence, health, motor or physical, sensory, such as vision and hearing, social and emotional, transition to post-secondary. So all of these things you can talk about in the present level of academic and functional performance. A lot of times people have templates, and I think that's coming up the next slides. Do you guys have templates in your district? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you guys all have to use the same template? Can you use your own template? These are the areas to consider, though, when we are talking about a student, in case you need, some ideas of some people sometimes forget about some of these things, but I see some people in the chat. Nope. Okay. So some people said they wish they had the templates, Matt. You ask and we will help. Right? So I was in 2 districts and we did have templates, but if you do not, we have some for you. And we're not saying that the best template, it's not really about the template, but it's really about making sure what's in it, right? But at least it's something, an outline of, so you guys can, of course, fill it in, and you can use, there's a couple examples of templates that we found. And like we said, we're not like endorsing any templates, but you can make your own templates as long as you're talking about all of the present level, the things that need to go in the present levels. So some districts do have it, some don't. Yep, and some you can adjust. I think Ashley was saying in here, and they fit to their needs. So it just depends on your coordinator. It depends on if they want everything to look the same, or if they're able to let the teachers do it. But there are some places we like some templates here that you can go, and we have a couple of examples on here. And of course, it doesn't give you the answers. It just tells you like the outline of all the things that you should do. So if you want to use them, you can. You don't have to, of course, but it just, there's a couple different ways. And I always like to share. So like on things like this, if you have a really good template or if you think that's pretty good, maybe get somebody's email and say, hey, we can share, or you can look at mine, or what do you think? As long as it's meeting all those needs of the students. Oh, okay. The template is exact to template used in redistrict. Great. Awesome. I'm trying to read the chat as I'm going. Yeah, we like if you have any templates that we can share out. We're not like no one's paying us for templates. We're just trying to share as many resources as possible with you guys. So really, we can share it. We will share it for all the teachers. We try to just support teachers as best we can, and it's we don't want to have to make more work. Oh, okay. So some people are not they're not required with those templates. All right. I always like to ask that question because everybody's so different. It's so funny because we're in Indiana, right? But we're all a little bit different depending. All right. So I think Matt, are you writing any? No, you're good. Okay. So there must be evidence for the current student's current level of skill. And here are some statements or some sources. This is kind of what Gail said earlier. We could talk about the statewide assessment results. You could talk about, this is the things that could, but we have to find a baseline. District assessment results like NWEA or iReady or iLearn, all those things. But if you're going to give it to me and I'm a mom and I don't know what that means, then it's not a really good data in that present level. If you're just giving me a score, right? Like, because I don't really know what that means. So we really need to make sure that if we're going to give iLearn scores, that we're going to talk about what the score is, but what does that mean? Like, is it what's deficient? What's the strength? A lot of those, they go down to the strand. So they do talk about decoding versus comprehension. What's something that students do well, and what's something that they need, instead of just saying that this is the score. That's a different way to look at that data point. Behavioral data, checklists, rating scales, and discipline referrals. Those are all, and sometimes discipline referrals could be subjective because it could depend on if the person does a lot of OSSs or they're pretty lenient. So we could say that, but those rating scales and all of those checklists, those are data that can go in the present levels. But as long as I feel like just explaining that so that the mom can pick it up, or the dad or the guardian can pick it up, and they understand what that means, that's better. Classroom performance information from the teachers. So sometimes the general education teachers will say, like, they'll just give grades, like the student's getting a C in science, but what does that mean? Are they handing in the assignments? Are they like, what is going on in that class? Like, it's just getting a C and it's doing well and getting a C. Well, that's not data. That's just, that's a very vague snapshot of what that student's able to do in that class. So what kind of skills are that student able to do? Are they able to follow two-step directions? Are they able to, how are their executive functioning skills? Are they able to start their task on time? Are they able to, those kinds of things are more what we need in that data, than just they're doing okay in our class and they're getting a C, because we don't really know what that means. What skills are they lacking? We're trying to think about the skill level. Intervention results are good for data. If we have like RTI or MTSS and then some actual interventions, what skill are they working on? What skill do they still need to work on? Observational data, like Matt talked about, that's great. Those are baseline data, and academic and behavioral comparison data for non-disabled students. So if a student is typically acting typical for their age, especially when they're little kids, they have like rating scales, and they're typically communicating with like the other students, then you should include that data because that is part of that. But making sure it's the whole picture. Matt and Gail, do you want to add to that part?
Well, I will just add that you have to remember that testing is like a snapshot of what kids do, that standardized test. And we all know that there are some kids that don't do very well on tests. And so your data from your classrooms are probably a better indicator of what the student can do and can't, and what they struggle in, than a test that's taken just one day as a snapshot.
And I've expounded on that too. It's just the idea that when we do share information like NWEA data and other assessment pieces that, a lot of times I see present levels that are just Lexile scores, NWEA scores. In the old days, we'd see ISTEP scores and things like that. And the scores don't really mean anything to mom and dad or the student truly. So we just have to explain what it means. What are we doing with that information? Because like Alana said earlier, if that information is not guiding our decisions in the rest of the IEP, then what's the purpose of it here? What are we doing with it? How is it guiding our decisions? And if we don't break it down to, the Lexile says score is this, we need to break it down further than that and say, here's what that means. Here are the items that this assessment tells us here's the strands that are really important for the student to understand. So we have to be able to take it to that level if we want to make it truly meaningful and helpful for us going forward in the IEP.
Does anybody have, and you could say this in the chat, but is it when you get some data from if maybe your students they're out in general education and you're trying to get like a baseline or some data from the general education teachers that you work with, is it hard to get that data part? Is it hard? Like, do they typically just put the grades? Because that's what I've seen a lot. They just kind of give you a report back of the grades, or does some of your schools do a good job with what skills do the student need to work on or how they're doing in that one? I'm just curious. Like, I was just wondering how, because a lot of times when I would get, that would be the hardest part with how do you get that information from the teachers? How do you word that to get the data that you need to put in those present levels? Just curious if anyone wants to share out or put it in the chat.
That goes to the stranger test. Like, a teacher can tell you that, oh, they got a B, or a C, and you don't know what that means. You don't know whether they just didn't do the work, whether they don't understand the work, whether they missed the work. So that's where your stranger test kind of comes into.
There's a lot of good stuff in the chat I was hoping to look at. So there's some Google Forms that you use to help get the information that you need. That's great. They do grades, but try to always go back and ask for more information. Yeah, that's always like the hard part, because you're like trying to get stuff done and then you're like, I gotta go ask a little bit more. I can get the grades from the computer system, right? Like, you can, like, I can go to Skyward sometimes and get my grades, but I need to know a little bit more than what the grades mean. So thanks for sharing. We have a Google form, performance data. That's good. But useful information can be a struggle. But I'm glad that that's not just with me. I like that. So they have access to PowerSchool, like I was saying, Ashley, like we had Skyward, yeah. And then you have a survey so you can get the behavior, strengths, and needs. That's great. So that you can talk about what's the behavior like in the class, what's the strengths, and what you still need. So you actually use those words, which is great. Yep. Well, thanks for that. And you guys can keep adding to that. But I found the same thing. Like, it was the grades, and I would say, why? We can get the grades at Skyward. I need to dig deep. We need to dig a little deeper, and we can ask these questions about why, because it's what's best for kids, but it's also like the legal part. We really have to have those present levels in there. We have to have that data in there to make sure that what we're serving kids, right? All right. All right, so here's some examples, some vague statements. And I've seen this, and I probably am guilty of actually writing these too. Like I said, when you know better, you do better, right? Is friendly and loves attention, maybe specific phrases, greets peers appropriately for age level. Received a math score of 50 versus can count to 25. So I know measurably, like I know what can count to 25 means versus received a math score of 50. And we are teachers, so sometimes we use that jargon and we forget that we're giving these to parents. And we're like, oh yeah, okay, we have to explain it a little more, right? Can't talk very well, speaks in 1 or 2 word sentences, that's specific, knows different careers, or can count 5 careers and 5 jobs associated with each, that's more specific. Difficulty reading 3rd grade materials versus reads good 3rd grade materials at 70 words per minute. So having that like assessment data, how do we know that what that need is? So turning those vague phrases into something specific. Difficulty following classroom rules, and I'm sure I probably have used that. Must use visual cues to follow classroom rules or instructions. So they're able to do it, but they're going to need a visual cue. They're able to do it, but they're going to need a prompt. So what does that look like more specifically? Spends a lot of time in suspension due to behavior problems. We probably have seen this in present levels. When directed, becomes angry and disrupts class. So what does that look like when I'm in your classroom? That I would get a better picture of that, of the why or what it looks like versus the vague phrase. And it has a language difficulty and will have trouble meeting language arts standards versus language impairment affects progress in grade level standards with words with multiple meanings. So very specific. We just like how to turn those vague phrases into specific phrases. And I think that is hard to do when we're busy and we're doing all these things, but the better we can get at this, it's a better picture, and the goals are going to be even better when we get our statements that look more like this. Do you guys like this? Do you guys agree with this chart? You guys see some good ideas? Put it in the chat. Thumbs up, thumbs down, smiley face. I liked this chart. I thought it was good. So thanks, Matt, for writing in the chat too. I think it was Matt. So I thought this was a good chart. If anybody else has any ahas on this? Yeah. Great. Great. Yeah, I like this too, because I think that I've used some of these vague phrases. Again, I was an English major, so I was probably very wordy. However, I need to be more specific, right? I have to be more specific, even to myself. So I do better when I know better. So thanks for putting some stuff. Yeah, hard time with getting this teachers to be more specific. That's great. Like this is a good way to coach them on some of these things, and you can use some of our slides to, if you have some of those in services with teachers, and say that this could be a good, good like activity to talk about. Look at your IEPs. What's vague? How can we make it more specific? That would be something that I would probably try to do with my teachers.
Yeah, I would add too, that can be a tricky balance too, is being,
yes,
because my point was trying to be more specific with questions and think about the information that teacher has that you would like to have in front of you. Ask those kind of things, but you have to be careful. If you overwhelm folks with questions, and then you're a lot less likely to get a response. So trying to think through, yeah, I think that's something that we all kind of are challenged by, because it's easy to give grades, it's easy to give test scores, but think about, if the students in that classroom, 80% of the school day, who better to talk about how they respond to group instruction or how they interact with their peers in small groups and those kinds of things. Even a couple anecdotes about how they've interacted with their peers can be good information for you to base some concepts off in an IEP. So those are valuable things. I think sometimes our agenda teachers don't kind of grasp how valuable their input really is to developing an IEP, because without that, I don't see that student most of that school day. So I don't really know, other than secondhand information from the people, what's going on. You have firsthand, you're the eyewitness to what's going on. So, and what can you tell me about this student other than beyond their grades? What's contributing to these great grades they're getting, or these poor grades that they have? Whatever it is, we have to understand a bit more than just the number. We have to understand the why part. And I think Alana mentioned that's really important.
I like that, Matt. You said that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Gail.
I was just going to say too, like Dorothy says, she struggles getting the teachers to respond. And I know she does not have that issue alone. That is an issue that lots of people have. Hopefully, maybe, I don't know, that's where you kind of need some administrative support to say it's important. Or if you can find some just short form that you could work to have answers that they just have to fill in. But I do know that's hard. I'm
Yes,
sure. Does anybody else have a way to do that?
Yes, I do. Actually, we have like a 7 question answer every email to the teachers. If they could email us back, if they don't do it a certain amount of time, I will ask them, remind them to fill it out. If I can't, if they still respond, I get the director of social service to do that within a week.
Yeah,
That's
good, Leroy. Yeah,
it's got to be persistent.
true.
Remind them, and make sure they don't give vague answers. Also,
right.
That's
Yeah.
good. Thanks for telling us.
Yeah. It's a hard thing. I understand. It's a hard thing. You got to, and it's hard because I know teachers don't like to tell on teachers. You don't want to have to go to the administrator, but sometimes you need to.
And it's a lot. They're busy, we know. But like Matt said, I liked what he said. He's like, the general education they're so valuable. Their information is so valuable to us because they are educate in those classes all day. So I really like how you said that.
Yeah.
And maybe making sure that collaboration, like you matter. We need your expertise, right? So I think that was a great way to squeeze that. All right. So here's an example. Jeremy, so here's Jeremy's needs, and we're going to talk this through. So we know that he needs to orally read grade 4 level text more fluently. So we know that. Okay. So he's in 4th grade. I'm a teacher. I've heard him read. He's very choppy. But how do I know that? But I know that's something that he needs to do. And by the end of like this grade, he needs to do it more fluently. I know this. I also know that he needs to spell more dictated words from a grade level list. Because I just remember that all the time he's not getting very many right. Like I know this, but I'm going to dig a little deeper, but I know this off the top of my head. And, we started doing vocabulary and we started writing in August, and now it's January. And Jeremy, I've noticed his writing samples are still, they don't look like they're improving, right? So those are the 3 things I'm thinking about Jeremy. I'm like, okay, fluency, spelling, and writing. So what are my data sources? So now I need to know it didn't happen unless there's data, right? It doesn't really happen. So the reading CVM tool that we use district-wide. So I'm going to use that reading source for the fluency. I'm going to use the reading, spelling, vocab, word quizzes for my evidence for the dictated words from a grade level text. And the biweekly writing samples is what I know my data source I'm going to use for his needs about the larger vocabulary in writing. So my present level is I gave him that CVM tool and he can read 24 words per minute from 4th grade level text. Okay. For spelling, the spelling score across 9 weeks is 10 of 25 words correct. And then on the district-wide grade level, that Jeremy's only getting 2 points on the 6-point scale, and the rubric was included in the documentation. So that is my assessment. That is how I know he has these needs. I know his needs are fluency or reading. I know, he's the spellings, he's having a hard time with that, and he's having a hard time with writing. I know that those are and I'm going to narrow that down. And then I'm going to find my sources. How am I going to prove that he has these needs? And what is my present level, or what's my baseline? I got to get a baseline on Jeremy. And this should be this is my present levels for the skills. So this is what he's able to do right now, but I know where he needs to go because I know that all students by the end of 4th grade, they need to be way more fluent that reads 24 words per minute. Like I know that he needs to do higher. So that's where we're going to go. That's the skills that we're going to work on. We're going to work on decoding or whatever what's stopping him. We're going to work on the spelling. We're going to work on those writing components because he's using those vocabulary, but he's not increasing his words. We're going to use some word banks to get him there. But those are the skills that I'm going to work on with Jeremy. So this is kind of a nice exercise where you know that you need to work on these things. You need to have a data source, and then you need to have a baseline or present level of where he's at to know that where he's going to be able to go. Matt, do you want to add anything to that, or Gail? Does anybody have any questions on that? And please put it in the chat if you're thinking. But
I've always got something to add, that.
Yeah, that's fine. Please do. Please add.
I apologize for that.
No,
but,
good.
That's something to think within this process. When you get to that present skill level, just keep in mind you may have to go a step further. If you look at say like 24 words per minute, correct words per minute at that 4th grade level. Fluency is not necessarily a skill to teach. There's components of it that are built up to increase fluency for our students. There's all kinds of research. I'm not going to try to give you the science of reading in a nutshell, but that's really the idea. The same kind of thing with spelling. The student might be, what spelling words are we challenged by? So just that, so we can focus. When we do have the time, which is such a valuable commodity. When we have the time to work with a student, can we focus on that need? Can we focus on that need enough so that we get a response for that individual? So focus on where they are, and this can help us narrow that down. So when I have time with the student, that's where we're starting. I know where to begin.
Yes, absolutely.
And Dorothy, I just saw your check. You're absolutely allowed to share the Padlet out. That's the whole intent of having that. So if you want that information, and really all the information you guys are getting today, please feel free to share. The more the merrier. And if you have questions, I know our emails are at the end of this presentation too. So if you have questions beyond today, please feel free to reach out. We'd all be happy to help in any way we can.
Yes, absolutely. We kind of have to be like investigators. Like we know that he has to do fluency, like Matt talked about. But is it the decoding? Is that the problem? Is it, what part of it? Is it the font? What part of it? We'll work on that skill in our classroom, but we know that they have to be more fluid because the other students are the same. Like we have those checks and balances with that. But getting that baseline is kind of what we're talking about with this slide. We know that there's a need. Why is there a need and how is there a need? So asking ourselves those questions kind of nail it down and have help with a specific present levels.
Well, and if anybody has something that they use that they are willing to share, if you send it to one of us, we can add it to the Padlet.
Yes. So thinking of a student and with your own improving, and again, how many of you guys have access to your own IEPs? You can put it in your chat, yes or no. But I'm just curious, like if you have one next to you, if you guys are working with one, thinking of a student making a short to-do list or to-do better list, or if you're a coach or if you're a coordinator, maybe you're looking at your IEPs of your teachers and you're like, okay, well, we need to beef up our present levels. Maybe they're too vague, or maybe there's not baseline data, or maybe what's one or two things that we can work on to make better? I think that's always good to grow after we have one of these sessions. Like, what can I work on the next time I have to write an IEP? Do I have all the components in there? Am I making sure that I have the impact statement, like all of these things? Do I have enough data sources? So just thinking about that, if you have access to your IEPs and you're looking, great. So a lot of you guys do. So if you're looking at your present levels of academic and functional performance, or all of these things that we're talking about, is there a part where you could maybe work on for the next time, or you learned something today, or you thought about something that you could do a little bit differently? That's our hope. So that was kind of improving our own practice. And if you're a coach, how would you could use our slides and share out different parts of how you can improve that within your building. So just making sure that IEP is consistent, making sure all of the parts flow together. Last week we did something. We're kind of a little bit every series we're focusing on something different, but it all should go together, right? Like you can't have good goals without good present levels. You can't have accommodations without all of it kind of go together. So even though it's kind of segmented, we are definitely still thinking about that golden thread we're kind of weaving our way through. So I'm glad you guys all have access to something that we can kind of think about as we're going on. But if you don't, this is where we have
Right.
present levels ourselves. So if you don't have an IEP, or if you want to just practice with us and work with us, we have a couple of present levels that we're going to give you time to look at. And I don't know the best way to do this, Matt. You might have to probably jump in.
Yeah, I think just in the interest of time, these are, if nothing else, there's some different examples of present levels that are from other different sources that, we've taken some of them from pacer.org and some from IRIS and some, so there's some things that the sources we go to for examples and resources there's some really good ones in there. The idea really, some of them are really, like this one, for example, gives me some information about the current level of performance, looks at impact and baseline data. So the present level itself, it just spells it right out there. Here it is. And not every present level is built that way. Most actually aren't. Sometimes you have to hunt for these kinds of things. So that's one of the pieces that can be helpful for yourselves, is especially when you inherit IEPs from somewhere else, like a move-in or somebody within your district. Look for this. Where's my present level information? Where's my support data? Where's my baseline information? I need to have eyes for those kinds of things. So that's something you can practice as you look at these examples a little bit. We don't have a whole lot of time today to do that, but that's a big piece. And I did want to share before we went too much further, because having Elisa in here reminded me of this too, because I know it's something she would share as we go through present levels. As you're reading through this, one of the bottom lines that was so helpful for me going through this is to think about, as you read through a present level, the whole statement, can you think about how teaching and learning is supposed to happen? As if it doesn't lead you to that discussion, I learned that from Elisa, having her go through that the first time, and it really has resonated with me. And it's been so helpful as you read through this information. That does it lead you on to the next step? Or am I thinking ahead to what's going to happen next? If it doesn't do that for you, then something's probably missing. And it may be just the way that it's written. That might be part of it. But a lot of times just there's some pieces that don't give you what you need. Does it lead you to that next thing? Does it lead you to, oh, here's what I need to do next with this student? Well, here's what I know they need to learn this next. If it doesn't do that for you, then it's missing something. So each one of these are pretty good examples, and I just encourage you to take a look at them and give you a few minutes or maybe a minute or so just to do that. And then we'll do that. I put the link to the Padlet up again. I'll do it again here. So I don't know if just so you have that, look at the presentation, look at these different examples. And when you have some time, kind of unpack those a little bit, I think it'd be really helpful.
Yes, and this one actually has an example of impact of exceptionality. So we talked about that impact statement. So I don't know if you have to have that part of the law. We talked about that earlier. So if you don't have that in your template, that would be something. And or if you don't have a template, making sure you have to address that somehow. But this one is one that kind of says it right there because it's part of the law. So they're kind of like, okay, I'm bolding that to make sure that my teachers have to put that in there. So there's some examples of different students with different kinds of disabilities. Depending on what you're teaching, you might be able to find an example. And we're not going to say like, don't copy it. Like this is just some like guiding questions of how a good, maybe not perfect, but a pretty good present level of academic and functional performance could be, right. And looking at your own to see what is missing or what's doing well with yours also. So,
and to build off what you just said, that the impact piece of the impact statement, well, it's legally required. We talk about that somewhat. That's in that statement, but also think about the purpose here is, students with, and I think Alana mentioned it earlier, that we want to make it really clear that the exceptionality or the characteristics of this disability follow the student everywhere they go. So it's not just in English language arts. Well, that might be where we pulled the data from to establish that this need exists. But it does exist everywhere they go. So every time the student reads, every time they are impacts that encounter. And we had a conversation before today, thinking through that a lot of times, students have a reading disability that affects their reading, whether it's a learning disability or something along those lines. That may also affect their access to math skills. There's still reading to be done in math, still being able to decipher with a word problem what's important and what's not. You need to be a pretty agile reader to be able to do those kinds of things. So really take those kind of things into account. So if you see a student with a learning disability in reading struggling in math, it may not be a computation need, but organization or reading or decoding. There's a lot to talk about there. And that's why I always remind folks to don't just stop at the first indication of a problem. Look at the why behind those things. You're going to have to dive a little deeper most often to find out where you need to really affect and support that student.
Yes. So do you guys have any thoughts about this present level? Do you guys have any, do you think it's pretty good? Do you think it's missing something? Anyone want to unmute or use a chat, or you can use emoji? We have a bunch of different examples, so you might feed through the Padlet in different places, which is totally fine. But did you guys find any useful examples? Do you think you could beef yours up? Anyone want to share anything? No one's telling on anybody. We'll all do better when we know better, right? I just always would say that it's a move in IEP that was bad. That was my thing. But you guys chatty, quiet, still there? All right, I just wanted to give some wait time to see if you guys had anything to say about any of them or if they're still reading. So we have a bunch of different ones. Matt and I said there, and I see a chat. Let me see. Oh, they're right. Okay, great. Okay, so Chris is new to writing them, which is great. That's why you're here. So yes. So there's a lot of data. If you guys have noticed in these present levels, it's not, it's pretty specific, which I think is good. It explains things. It's the impacts of the disability. It's written differently in some of these examples, if you like. It doesn't have to be a certain way, but it does have to just be there. So wanted just to give you some examples that you can use. Again, don't copy them, but it's always good to, I think I need models and I need examples when I'm working through something. So I hope this is helpful for some of you guys. And then I took that, and then when we were working through these examples, we were kind of making a summary of like the important parts of the to make some goals around it. This is just kind of our brains working. And I like this one because this is Jill's summary. We're kind of reading about it, but this part is Jill's currently reading an average of 24 words per minute with 75% accuracy on a 4th grade level. Well, if I just knew, if they just put that in the present levels, I would think that was pretty good, because 75% to me sounds like, hey, Jill's doing pretty good, right? But then when you read the next part, it says the spring benchmark for 4th grade is 95 words per minute with 93% accuracy, which means that all the other kids in 4th grade are reading 95 words per minute. Jill's only at 24, and they're at 93% accuracy. But I thought if I didn't know that part, because sometimes when we read some data, we just see that part, but we have to know where Jill is in regards to where the other students are supposed to be. So making sure that when we're talking about data, having, like Matt kind of talked about earlier, knowing the whole picture, like Lexile scores are great, NWAR scores are great when we know more about it. So we have to be more specific. So I just liked this one because I was like, if I was a teacher and I was like, oh, she's not doing so bad, like 75% sounds pretty good. But if the other kids are here, we have to try to close that gap. So if it keeps getting further and further apart, we need to find that skill to help her, with that accuracy and with getting some more words. So I just like to put that out about that data. And then let's see, anything else? Does anybody else have any questions about any of these or anything like that? And then if it says a possible relationship has been identified between the sight word accuracy and oral reading fluency. So we know maybe the skill that we're going to be talking about with Jill, that would be a goal that we can maybe teach her with especially designed instruction, would be we're going to teach her how to maybe it's sight words, maybe it's decoding, maybe it's whatever Jill needs. That would be the skill. That's how we're trying to get Jill up to that 93% accuracy with 95 words per minute. But we don't know that unless we had that baseline data. First, we have to have that baseline data that Jill is at 24 words per minute. We know where she needs to go, right? We see the spring benchmark where she needs to be. And how we're going to get there is we're going to teach her some of those skills, and we got to figure out what that root cause is, why she's not there. And that's what we hone in on in our goals. So that's how the present levels kind of connect with the goals and kind of connects with the STI. It all goes together with that golden thread. So just thinking about that in our present levels, making sure we have enough information that we can write our goals from that present level of academic functional performance. It's kind of how my brain sees that. Does that make sense, everybody? Thumbs up. All right, some people like the example, so that's great. And I think that is, again, I think I just said it without looking at the screen. But we kind of like my brain, how it works out. We're working on the multisensory approach. We're working on the skills that Jill needs to get up to where she needs to go. And this is kind of where we're talking about our goals. This is where we would figure out where our goal was. But unless we had that baseline, unless we had that data, we wouldn't be able to get to our goal and our needs. So that's all on this slide too, what I just talked about. Okay. All right. So we're going to skip these, right, Matt?
Yep.
They're just going to, okay.
Yep. Because we got 15 minutes.
I know. Okay. Well, I want to give some time for questions.
Yeah.
So some present level errors. Sometimes we've already talked about this. We're going to go really quickly. Vague descriptions, statements that are not related to the need, reporting solely on standardized tests. This is just a summary of all the things we've said. Statements that are not individualized, so no copy and pasting, and stating the student's disability area as a present level. It's the impact, what the impact of the disability have on you. So anything else, Gail and Matt? With that part, going quickly on that.
Good.
All right, and we already talked about improving. What if your boss tells you that it's too wordy? That's what Jacqueline. What do you, I don't know. What do we, that's
I
at the.
You
I
need to
think you
put
gotta
what
do
you
the
need
best
to
you-
put.
Yeah, the best you can to summarize what you've got
Yeah.
if you can, and that's something that I guess with transition training that came up a few times. You know, if we're polling our peers, our classroom teachers, and it's repetitive information we get back, it's okay to summarize that information and do the best you can. Like I always kind of joke, it's like 4 to 5 teachers surveyed told us that the student's out of seat 50% of the time. You know, that's kind of silly, but that's the kind of information you can kind of summarize instead of saying 7 times that that they're having out of seat problems and repetitive. And I think Alana feels your pain there, Jacqueline, as far as being an English major, having the writing skill and the need to express yourself in writing. Not to say, I think you want to be as clear as you can, but you have to think about a concise statement as much as possible. And part of that is realizing who the audience is for this document. It's not just other teachers. It is for other teachers, other special ed teams, IEP teams, but parents and as students get older, and some schools have more involvement with students in this meeting than others early on. But you have to think about that too. Is this accessible to parents? Is it accessible to the student? And if we go to, we can really overwhelm people pretty quickly if we're not careful with the information. So we just have to be thinking and to kind of I don't want to step on Alana's toes here, but the next couple slides are just really resources for more information around present levels. We pulled some examples from these sites, and these are the places we tend to go to for more information. So if you haven't visited the Iris Center or don't know about them, they are worth a visit, and
They are definitely worth a visit. They are awesome.
And you'll spend, it's one of those places as an educator that you kind of get lost in. There's so much
rabbit
information.
hole. Just go
and
down.
You're like, oh my gosh, they have this too, and there's more here, and it's just, I don't know. It's
They have modules. You can get PGP
Yep.
points, so you can go there for free. So this
Yep.
is in there for you guys if you want to
Yep.
learn anything about writing goals or anything else. Definitely go there for sure. And then the progress center is another one. And Matt said there's tip sheets and all of these kinds of things that we use. So please feel free to use that. I know you have tons of spare time, right? But if you do, or if you need it to coach other teachers, I think that's a great place to go.
If you have the time, these are worth your time.
Yeah,
I would
for
say
sure.
that. So if you have the time to spend, you're not going to be wasting it in those 2 places. So.
No, they're great. Okay, and then the last slide, last 2 slides, and then you guys can ask a question and go. So the IEP notes, we just like to say the written notes documenting the meetings, whoever's writing the notes, somebody should be designated to write the notes. The date and the purpose of the meeting should be in there. The names and the titles of the participants are already in there, the system by default. And the issues discussed during the meeting should be part of the IEP notes. So don't duplicate, explain, meaning if it's written somewhere else, it doesn't need to be written again. But really, how did the changes come up with? Like the CCC committee discussed accommodations, and the student says he's not using this accommodation. So the group decided as a whole that we're going to remove this accommodation. How did that conversation come to happen? Don't just say accommodations were discussed and whatever was taken out, but why? But why? What was the reason? What was the explanation behind it? Instead of just repeating what's already in the IEP, kind of explaining what happened. If somebody could read it, they know what happened in that meeting. They know that there was a consensus. They know what you guys talked about, and a quick snapshot of that should be in there. And Matt, please jump in if you want it.
I would just say, do it at the bottom of every page. Do it at the bottom of every page. And then it will all show up at the end, but that also will cue you into where the discussion happened.
And I just think 2 things. The reason this comes up in this particular segment or session is when you go to the IEP system, that existing data page is the first time you're really interacting with parents. And there's space for the conference notes at the bottom of that page. So that's why it kind of came up naturally in the conversation. But like Gail mentioned, in the current system, at the bottom of every active page on the IEP system, there's a space for your conference notes. And it's important that you have someone designated to do that in the meeting so that it doesn't get lost. And I guess I said there were 2 things, but I came up with more, I suppose. The last thing I'd say though is it's a great place to document your agreements as you're going through the process, that here's the things we did, here's what we agreed upon. Disagreements are maybe something you can document, but it's important to document within this. We discussed these options and we agreed upon this. We discussed these different tools and we agreed upon this. At least everyone can live with this choice, and we have that clear documentation throughout. And it's evidence, clear evidence of parent voice and consideration throughout this document. So that should come through in other areas, but we really want to make sure we're identifying what the parents brought to the conversation and how that was handled in that.
Absolutely. So we have some examples of this also.
Right.
Sorry, is there someone in the chat?
Yeah, what did
Sure.
she say?
She
Oh,
says that this
Oh,
is
okay.
kind of, and I guess what we should say whenever we give directives, check local listings, to make sure, your district's going to have, if they have a template, maybe didn't weren't aware they had one. Ask around and see.
Well, and
If
plus
they have some directives on how to complete the notices and the notes, that's probably what you need to follow. And I think it's good to have good discussions around those things, but what your director gives you is probably what you need to follow.
And yeah, that's true. But I will say that they do all show up in one place at the end. So that's another reason. Like they will all show up at the end all together. It will just list them. Like if it was on the present levels, it will list them. So yeah. Okay, go.
Here's
I'm
just some
sorry.
example-
Questions? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can't say Matt Johnson or Gail said. We just have to say, see what,
You can say Gail said.
do
I
what
don't
your
care.
building says. We're not, we're not the law. It's okay. But the notes, here's some more examples of it. Just introductions from of course, again, no copy, but this is just, instead of talking about duplicate, this is what happened. So I can get a better picture of, that he has extended time, but not using it. So the accommodation was removed, other accommodations remain appropriate. So instead of just duplicating, just explaining a little bit more. And so these are just a little bit of examples that you guys can read through yourselves. And if you have any questions, Gail said, I like that. Dorothy's going to say Gail said. I like that too.
I should.
But there is additional notes at the end. You can still
Right.
use the additional notes, but anyway, I don't know.
I don't know. We didn't really mention that, and this is really a key point to this whole thing, is all the notes and the present level should be brand new every year. There should be brand new information every annual case review. And I don't know if we said that explicitly, but I want to make that really clear that there should be new information, based on what we've just done with the student. It's moving forward with us. So it's important that we do that, because that's one of those things that is heartbreaking when we see present levels that just haven't been updated, because we know there's no way the rest of the IEP is new or informed if that's not been done. So that's something just to look out for.
Make sure they're current and relevant. They're definitely current. Right. They're not old.
And I think we talked a lot about the relevant piece, but the current piece is really clear. That, not to say you can't keep some information from year to year, because that relevancy is an important discussion, but there should be new information each time, because we just spent a whole year working with them. What changed or what didn't change, and what do we know about that? Because all that should be.
Well, and what you can do when you're putting stuff, excuse me, Matt, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was just thinking about how you said that should go on. If you put your name in the date, so that if it's not deleted because you think it's relevant, at least the next person will know when that was written, so that if at some point it becomes irrelevant, they know which section to take out.
Perfect.
Absolutely. What would you include in present levels for a moving conference? You could use, and you guys could answer too, but no, definitely not enough time. You can, sometimes you have observational data, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have, if it's a current evaluation, if you have some data from around that, you can put that in there. If you have, depending on how long if the IEP is still valid, I think some of that present level still helps the new teacher figure out what that student is, and Matt and Gail can definitely.
You might not have a lot of data, but you can use that present levels that comes with that that move in and just kind of focus on those things that they put in as working on and present
See,
levels.
if you can't discover anything different, you have to
Yeah.
carry forward with what you do know.
Right.
And you're on the hot seat in those 10 days. So if there's something that you notice in that time, short amount of time, that might be your addition to the present levels, or even if you can just confirm what's already mentioned, and that we also see this. We notice the disruptive behavior. We also notice that here, and it's evident that they're struggling in reading or math or whatever it happens to be. We can confirm that, or we're not sure about that yet.
You
So,
can
and it's
always
one of
have
those
an,
things. Go ahead. Yeah.
no, go ahead.
I just think it's one of those things with move-ins that typically, if you're not sure if it's difficult or if it's a difficult situation, you're probably going to meet again.
Right.
Just know that if you're not sure what's going on, dedicate yourself to collecting and get information so the next time you meet, you're ready to go. And there's not any
Absolutely.
question.
And we have some more examples that we don't have to go through, but if you guys want notes examples, and sometimes you're not in charge of the notes, but sometimes you are. So it just depends on what your role is. But just making sure it's not, again, not duplicated, but explained. I think that's the best way to talk about the notes to what's going on in the meeting, so other people know what happened during that meeting, and then their current notes also. And not sometimes old notes go there. People, so just make sure it's just from that meeting. And let's see, somebody has something in the chat, but okay, got it. All right, just making sure there's nothing in all right, I think, and we wanted to give a couple minutes. I'm sorry, it kind of went longer, but it's 4:25 already, or 5:25 where you are. But if you could do our evaluation to make sure that we're here, our boss wants to make sure we're here, no, and that we answered your questions. And if you need anything from us, please put that on there on the left, on the right, if you want to do anything. We have other recordings and other things. If you want to register for anything like that, that would be great. We appreciate you guys doing that. But if you have questions, this is the time to unmute and ask us too.
And also, I will send you certificates in the next 2 days. So you'll get credit for the time you've spent.